party every night for a year? Okay. So I was told this story might fit here. TLDR at the bottom. Sorry for poor formatting or grammar. I went to school in California in the 90s. I bought a house 4 years ago in a quiet neighborhood. I had wanted to get into that neighborhood for years. My best friend lives there. It was a couple blocks from my kids' school. It was a good neighborhood. Then COVID hit. My neighbors across the street were forced to move at the beginning of the pandemic before the eviction moratorium was in place. They were really good neighbors. We were friendly with each other and we were sad to see them go. So when the property owner rented to a new family, we were hoping we could cultivate a friendly relationship. Unfortunately, that was not the case. About a month after they moved in, the lockdown started. And that's when things went from 0 to 100 real quick. For the next year, every night there was a huge party. Cars down the street, music so loud you could hear it over regular house noise in every room in my house. My friend in the next cul-de-sac would text me regularly if the music he was hearing was my neighbors. We tried to be civil. I asked politely. I brought them beer. I offered some killer 420. Eventually, they threatened me and my wife, so we started calling the police. Almost every night for 4 months. We organized with the neighbors. And they started calling the police as well. Eventually, the others gave up and started selling their houses because the renters were just that bad. We were still upside down on our place, so it wasn't an option for us. Eventually, the police told me that I needed to stop calling and that it wasn't their issue to deal with. That I was a bigger nuisance than the renters' music. It was at that time the housing market was taking off. Houses were selling in my area for $40 to $50K over appraisal value. My wife and I looked at what we needed to make so we could move and listed our home for that. In 3 days we had a handful of obscene offers to choose one. But it was the lowest offer that stood out to us the most. Their offer was a good $20K under the next lowest, but they sent a letter. I'm a sucker for a letter, especially one with a picture of a young pregnant couple and a dog. And a patrol car? Turns out the young man is a police officer newly appointed at the local PD. And he takes his patrol car home. I knew at that point that this was the family to sell my house to. Money be damned. I moved out as the neighbors were throwing a huge party. The next day the police moved in and they haven't had another since. I drive by regularly on my way to my buddy's place. They just sit quietly in their garage looking bored. I make sure I honk and wave every time. And TLDR. After a year of listening to my neighbors partying all hours of the night and pointing their speakers at my house and no help from the local law enforcement, I sold my house to a cop. One way to stop obnoxious parties is to get your hands on some liquid ass. Sneak by and spray their yard with it. They won't be sticking around for long with the rotten diarrhea stench it leaves behind. This adds new meaning to the phrase, party pooper. I did the same thing with a condo once. But the cop's offer was only $3,500 under the maximum. So I had a bit of luck there. The cop, wound up arresting him, the obnoxious neighbor, several times, until he finally wound up spending so much time in jail that he ran out of money and his place got foreclosed on. My initial theory was that he lost his job due to missing work. But another former neighbor of mine says his primary income was being a weed dealer. And a combination of having a cop living downstairs and our state legalizing weed pretty much killed that. I don't know how true that is. I wouldn't kiss off $20K like that, but if you feel you got your money's worth, good on you. I have a downstairs neighbor who complains about us being loud when my roommate and I eat dinner in our kitchen. We are not being obnoxiously loud. If I ever sell my place, I will make sure to sell it to a family with many children. I love this. Sports medal, sports medal, sports medal. Also, thank you for selling at a reasonable price. As someone trying to one day own my own property one day, the futility is real. The buyers will forever remember your monetary sacrifice. So, the cops, unable to do anything about your situation, have one of their own get a good deal on the house. And then the parties stop. Cops are the real pros here. Let's do nothing about this and get some sweet real estate for Jimmy and his wife. But hey, if you're happy, you're happy. Op. Congratulations. Gave up $60,000 to own the neighbors you were moving away from anyway. You do you, but damn. That was a poor financial decision. Pyrrhic victory IMHO. I love and I hate this. On one hand, you got your revenge on the renters and their obnoxious ways. But on the other hand, it only got resolved because the police were willing to do for one of their own what they weren't willing to do for you. Literally choosing to do their job when tit became convenient. The injustice of it is galling to me. Geez, here I am 30. Renting a place without even a garden. With a money situation looking like I'll never own my own property. $20K would be 10 years worth of savings to me. I lived in Boston and had a neighbor doing the same thing. All night. Every night. There was mariachi music playing so loud my dishes rattled in the cabinet on the far side of my home. I tried to talk to them, but they laughed at me and slammed the door in my face. My landlord swore that there was nothing he could do about it. So I called the cops. The cops would show up. Tell them to stop it. They'd stop it. The cops would leave. And then it would start again. I talked to the landlord again. He said there was nothing he could do about it. So I called the police again. Each night. The thing is, in Boston, maybe MA in general, but I only knew about Boston. If the police are called to the same address more than 3 times in a year, they fine the owner. It's like $50. And they keep adding $50 to it each night they're called again until it reaches a maximum of $500. Also, the fine was sent to them in the mail. And at the time mail took like 2 weeks to get there. So I kept phoning the cops once a night. And soon they started sending fines. And the fines started getting bigger. And bigger. And finally they were fining the landlord $500 a night. And the first fine hadn't even arrived yet. Eventually the fines started arriving. Every day. The first couple days the landlord ignored it. But soon, the fines had, in total, exceeded the annual rent of the apartment in question. And they were still coming. With another year's rent worth of fines on the way. Suddenly, the landlord found something he could do about it. Because those tenants were abruptly gone. That landlord, I learned, needed an incentive to do anything. Like when roaches invaded. He refused to do anything until I put several giant roaches in a plastic bag and nailed it to his office door overnight. There was an exterminator in the next day. It's too bad the police just couldn't do their job. Once the cops said they would not do anything. The proper response is to slash tires. In a way that you cannot be caught. 20+ cars with slashed tires and they get the message real quick. So you give the cop a discount on a house to get back at them for not doing anything about the partying? Funny how the police didn't want to deal with it until one of their own was living next door too. These guys. I mean seriously. Violating lockdown for the entire year is bad enough. But couldn't they have cited them for violations of noise ordinances? Bad. Having to put up with police saying you were a bigger nuisance than the loud neighbors. Better. Deciding to move. Selling your house to the lowest bidder. Who happens to be a cop. Who brings his car home. Ending the parties once and for all, priceless. Epic. And totally worth it emo. Funny how quickly it became no longer their problem to now it's their problem. So you basically spent $20,000 to quiet a neighborhood you were no longer living in? I bet your old neighbors, except the noisy ones, are happy. R. Pyrrhic Revenge.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.